Okay, hello. I am Anto Budiarjo. Good afternoon. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern. In case you're wondering who we are, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org. And most important note to make here is that the views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. And please do post questions and comments and thoughts on the chat to make this as interactive as possible. This slide deck is on mondaylive.org, just in case you need any of the links or information we provide on here. So this being January, leading up to AHR Expo, aka ASHRAE, we are dedicating the Monday Live this month to the preparation towards the summit that we're holding at AHR on the Sunday. And our agenda, a normal chit chat, and then we're going to be talking about industry initiatives, all the different industry initiatives that has been going on leading up to the summit. But before we do that, just a reminder of the Smarter Summit. There's a link to it if you want to head over there and register. It's free, of course, so hope to see you then. But before that, Ken, what's going on?
Lots. It's been kind of hectic for an old man trying to keep up with this. Our reinvention goes well. We're hard at our AHR sessions. Extremely pleased with the support from the industry. We're just creating some unique plates for each of our sessions, and we're starting to see how to try and get all of this information from the face-to-face to the online. And we're kind of pleased that what we've done is we've created a plate for each one. We've got a QR code that leads you to the session and each of the individuals. Just by definition, most of our speakers and hosts are either contributing editors or sponsors, so they all have the ability to write directly on our site. So they're asking, can I bring 100 PowerPoints? The answer is no, but you can provide a virtual link to anything you write, and you can pretty much change right up till showtime. So we're kind of trying to build a bridge between face-to-face and online, and we're starting. I'm really pleased having the industry give us a little bit of their time. The experienced people is so amazing because they know exactly what it is they want to say. We don't have to go through the 10-year curve to get somebody up to speed to try and figure out what we're all talking about. So that is really working well. If you just click on that link, you'll be able to see how that's really going to flush out. The other thing, I wrote an article for Contractor Magazine, and it dawned on me is this is the who's who of the building automation industry when I saw how many speakers we actually have. That picture there just shows a portion of them. So that article has been well received. What else? Our latest advertiser is interesting because it's a software company that's a spin-off of Carrier and Automated Logic. So I think that's a bit of a trend of the future is as we work with our reinvention, everyone else gets to share their reinvention, and a lot of that is a lot of new companies, a lot of new startups. Last week we brought on Passive Logic. Yeah, it seems we're getting good support for our online library. I'm extremely pleased.
Great.
So how long do we give you that you can keep calling what you're doing a reinvention, by the way?
Forever. I see that we will never stop reinventing it. And as everybody touches it, they change it into something that, I never thought of that. That's a great idea. And we have the flexibility to do that. But at this point too, we're pretty agile because we haven't got a clue what we're doing.
This whole thing is, I find it to be very social media like, right? in a lot of
Correct.
ways. So,
The only thing we see is that we see ourselves as a library for social media. Social, if you want to have a conversation, take it to social media.
Yeah.
What we are is we're the context of the industry where you would actually find that social media post. The problem with social media is that it's time driven. And so you make this amazing post, you have an amazing discussion, and now I've challenged you to try and go back and find that. It's almost impossible. So what this is the launch pad, the landing pad for all of that. It's just a library. It's just a virtual library, as Automated Buildings was 20 years ago. It did it when the web was open. Now we're doing it with social media rules.
I really like it. I think it's a vast improvement.
Thank you. I appreciate
Great.
that.
Mark,
So I've got two things to share with the group today. So the conversation about the return to office continues. And I'm sure like it will continue for some time. So just a couple key points here that is of late, that the average occupancy in 10 major cities within the US still are below 50% as of last week. As of end of 2022 or much of 2022. And the same thing is continuing for early 2023, except though, which I'll address here in a minute. And then the popular days, which is no surprise, continually get confirmation Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of those folks who are back in the office or being at least ordered to come back in some way, shape, or form. And this I actually found really interesting. You know, part of the whole discussion is, well, a person's productivity is going to decline and by working remotely. And hence, that is not the case. Stanford recently completed and announced their research and found that 5% more, that people were 5% more productive working remotely than in an office, which I thought was interesting, but no surprise, because I think we all know when you're working from home is, you know, you're working and then it's yesterday, Saturday, oh, well, I'm gonna go work a little bit. So you tend to just kind of pick that up. And as I'm saying, this return to office is only at 50%. There are more corporations coming out and making that mandated for you to come back in now. Starbucks is one, as far as the corporate offices, and this link to Business Siders, a list of a lot of the offices now that are making it mandatory. Before, they seem to be up to the supervisor or the head of the department or whatever. But now I think people are getting a little bit anxious here and mandating it, and they're throwing up, well, if you want to continue working here, you do have to come into the office. So anyway, there's that. And then the second one is,
before that, what I
sure.
find interesting is this jump between 5% and 9% in 2 years. So in other words, after a few years, we're going to be really, really efficient at working at home, which is not a bad thing.
yeah, well, again, it's you know, I think you get to it, you've got all the tools, obviously, you know, computers and connectivity and everything, you know, why not? So
it's interesting too, Mark, with your data there. We've been tracking the applicants to jobs in our industry that are coming from you know, official sources that we work with, like the U.S. military outplacement when they're leaving the service, and other workforce agencies. And of those individuals, 10% of them are saying they will only accept work that is at home. So that's encouraging that 90% of the people applying to this field expect to be out and about.
that is interesting. And
my question is, what does this mean to our industry? Some of these trends here that you're showing.
I think it's still too early to tell, to be honest with you. Because obviously technician, if you look at the type of position, technicians, folks who are out in the field, always been in the field, will always remain in the field. That's what they do. But then you get, you know, the folks like many of us here on the phone who are, you know, marketing, administrative, whatever, developing stuff is, I think it really doesn't matter, you know, and again, I think it's going to come down to preference of what the corporation or the company, what they're going to tolerate and not tolerate.
But if your
It may
if your
also,
office, sorry, Melissa, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say was, you know, but if it is 3 days a week, as we've said before, that means the office or the building is empty for 4 days a week. And, you know, is that good value for money for me? How do I deal with that? I mean, I don't think people really got their head around that. And I think there has to be some way of, you know, being able to determine who is coming into the office so you can, you know, how much do I heat it up or cool it down? You know, how many floors do I use? As we said last week, you know, hotels have been doing it for years, but
Yeah.
somehow you're going to have some way of determining how many people are coming in the office. You can't have 90% on Wednesday and, you know, about 5% on Monday.
The markets have spoken and decided that all of that real estate is worth 38% less than it was pre-pandemic. So I think that's a very material factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, again, what you just said, Roger, to me is an opportunity for our industry. Again, to be able to monitor, control based on real occupancy on a given day, a given day, I won't say a moment, but a given day. And to me, we've got the technology. Again, this is a whole new business thrust, as I see it, that makes our industry technology much more valuable than it was, let's say, pre-pandemic. So.
Right, we need to move on.
It may also emphasize the importance and value in some of the residential innovations that are out there in our industry and some of the organizations that are prioritizing work in that area. So it could provide new opportunities for innovation as well.
And
Mark.
yeah, just to sum up here, just on Project Haystack, we have officially announced that we will have a on-site venue next and this year, June 5th through the 7th in Nashville. And there's a press release, and that won't be live till tomorrow. So these two links will not work. One will work tomorrow and the other one will work on the following day. And then also we've announced our spring issue of Connections Magazine. So we're looking for articles to be contributed, of course, advertisers and stuff like that. So Project Haystack continues to rock on, move forward, and set the industry standard for data tagging and modeling and all that. So
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mark. I had a couple of things. Rick, Jim, and myself had an opportunity to do a podcast for CABA, and it's now out at that link. And they're actually going to promote it widely tomorrow onwards. They meaning CABA, obviously. And the discussion is really about a lot of the stuff that we talk about, what's going on in the industry and sort of leading up to the summit. So if you have a drive somewhere that you need something to listen to, it's a good use of 30 minutes. And the other news here is that we have we meaning Monday Live have a Twitter handle now. Yay. I don't see too many excited faces. Come on, smile.
Just what we always needed, Otto.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. Our life has changed now.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, you can tweet us there and follow us and all that kind of stuff. Any other thoughts before we move on to the topic of the day? Hearing nothing, we are talking about the Smarter Summit preparation, and a reminder that we're heading up to the summit, and we're really sort of having a chit chat here in the base camp, preparing to head up to the summit in Atlanta. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a different set of slides. This is what the agenda is starting to look like for the summit. First session is going to be talking about owners changing needs, which is basically what we discussed last week here on Monday Live. That was a really great conversation. Thank you, Rick, and Anna was also driving that as well. And we heard a lot about how things are changing on the owner's side, meaning on the demand side. If you think about this as a supply and demand, with the industry providing the technology for the building owners. So there's definitely some major trends and major changes going on in terms of what the demand is asking. And what we're going to be talking about today is really the what's changing on the supply side, on the industry side. And the way we're actually framing that is by looking at them and just going through and acknowledging all of the different initiatives that's going on in the industry, what we are working on collectively. And the way we're sort of organizing this is around the 5 pillars of action that was created by the Coalition for Smarter Buildings that Rick leads. These are the 5, and for each one, we're going to have one of the members of Monday Live speak to the various things that's been going on over the past 2 or 3 years. So I'm going to hand it over to Tracy Markey to talk about interoperability, which is something that you've been living for decades, but what's been going on in the last couple of years that sort of we should be excited about?
Well, thanks, Anto. It's kind of interesting that this is such a new and important topic these days when, like you said, it's been center to a lot of what I've been involved with for a couple of decades. So on one hand, it's not a new concept. On the other hand, there is a lot going on to really drive this home at a whole different level. The list of 7 items here are all perfect examples, things that some or all of us have been involved with in terms of sort of defining and driving interoperability to the next level. Everybody that listens to this show is certainly familiar with Smarter Stack, something that Monday Live created. If you haven't, then take a few minutes to go look at that. Concept of independent data layer is, again, something that's been around for a while, but has gained sort of new life and new focus as, you know, IDL. I know James Dice talks about this some. So it's kind of gained new focus where we historically have talked about interoperability being all about the networking or protocol or you know, kind of the physical layer. This raises that whole thing up a level. API first product development. There's been a lot of work over the last, well, it's been going on for a long time, but especially the last, say, 5 to 7 years when it comes to API development. You know, whereas it used to be a little document that everybody handed out, here's how you can interface at the top level with my system, now has really become an architectural way to build a platform. You know, I know our platforms have APIs top to bottom throughout, so it makes interoperability and integration with other platforms really easy. And there are a lot of best practices that have been published that are really driving this whole concept forward. Ontologies and semantic tagging, there's been a lot of work going on with that. Mark talked a little bit about Haystack and everything as that continues to push forward. There are others that have been out there, of course, in the industry, Brick, Real Estate Core, ASHRAE 223 is trying to bring all of that kind of together. We've got to get the collaboration and the standard ontologies to standardize, I guess, a little bit further. Connection profile, something Anto's been very involved with in driving this through digital twins and other areas. But if you're not familiar with that, it's really a standard way to connect systems to other systems and create that last that last bullet point, that system of systems architecture, in a way that doesn't require a lot of the first few bullet points here to be disseminated in terms of specific knowledge of data that's out there and available. So a whole new way of thinking of things and how to make things operate at a systems level. And then another thing that's really driving the need for interoperability and sort of new interest in it is this explosion of IoT offerings out there, where everybody is building these islands of automation or these application-specific solutions and systems. They're getting adopted and deployed more and more in our industry and buildings, and creating a situation where we have a bunch of these standalone systems. So driving some of these concepts listed above into more and more of those IoT offerings is going to be a critical part of making all of this come together in the end, and it's starting to happen. It's happening at different levels than what it's done historically. And already talked about system of systems architecture. So a lot going on in the interoperability world for sure.
So just a quick question. If you compare what has happened in the last year or so, and the realization and people picking up these concepts, and compare it to, let's say, 20 years ago when you started thinking about interoperability, is kind of chalk and cheese, or is it just a progression? Can you speak to that a little?
The biggest difference is hardware versus software, right? So interoperability, when we talked interoperability 10 or 20 years ago, it was all about the hardware level interoperability for the most part. And these days, the hardware, the protocol, who made the system, what color are the boxes, matters a whole lot less. And it's more about getting to the data and understanding that piece of it, which is being done instead of at a network level and a variable level. It's been abstracted and it's being handled at a much higher level, right? The new integration platform to a lot of people is the cloud, right? It used to be somewhere below the cloud, let's say, but these days, and that often is true, even if it's all on-premise stuff, the concept of that is still at a much higher level than it was previously in trying to bring everything together.
Is it fair to say, Tracy, I mean, the kind of on-prem interoperability and connectivity has kind of been going for quite a while now, thinking back with Modbus and BACnet and LON and things like that. But what's kind of accelerating this is the kind of connectivity and interoperability across the whole level to the cloud and getting more data, as you said, out to other people. So it's kind of been accelerating for the past couple of years because there is this demand for the information off-prem, and all the newcomers coming in with, whether it's some of the things we were talking about earlier, occupancy or indoor air quality, and that's accelerated this whole world.
Completely agree. To me, I've talked about this, if anyone has seen any of my presentations about this perfect storm. You remember in the movie, there's 3 storms that came together to form one big perfect storm. And in our industry, it's that ubiquitous connectivity that never existed 20 years ago. There's the cybersecurity, and that is now becoming a bigger, I didn't used to say that 5 years ago even, but now really is one of the storms that's driving this forward. The ability for these IoT systems to communicate in a secure way to a cloud platform, for instance. And then to your point, just the general demand and acceptance of things connected and sharing of data, and the expectation, I would even say, of that happening really is the final element that's really driving that forward.
And perhaps
Tracy,
the customer getting smarter too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
in addition to what you guys said, I would throw in there the more prevalent of the customer's demand for open. In other words, I think open and interoperability go hand in hand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And if you don't you're never going to be completely interoperable, whether your data, software, hardware, whatever, until it's the acceptance of a true open total system.
Yeah,
Right.
and just one final quick thought. I know you want to move on, Anto. Those are the exact same words that we used 20 years ago, open and interoperable, but they really mean something different today. So all of these things combined really are going to what that new meaning is.
So over to Jim. Lots going on in the analytics. Can you sum it all up?
Absolutely. I think that, after 20 years in the analytics field, we're finally beginning to cross certain chasms and not others. I think fundamentally a lot of the interoperability and the things that Tracy just mentioned have allowed people to understand that the data can be collected, the data can be acted on. So FDD in a lot of people's minds is becoming a mainstream offering. And a lot of the added application values like ESG reporting will bring enterprise visibility from organizations and will, finally get us out of the janitorial closet and into a place where people can see the value add that our industry is actually adding at a C level when it comes to not just energy and cost savings, but carbon as well. And allow organizations to build continuous improvement processes to drive to net zero. And certain carbon accounting regimes like ISO 50001. So what we're seeing is a lot of standards and a lot of development across the whole industry, including energy engineering, building automation, interoperability, computer network, security, all these things coming together and really allowing us to cross the chasm to make analytics a mainstream offering. So over the last few years, John Petsy and I put together a Division 2525 specification for analytics. Basically, one of the problems that we had as an industry was there was a race to the bottom going on to see who could use the word analytics and sell something cheaper around it. So what we did is we established a fence, table stakes, a basic understanding, if you will, around what a minimum viable product for analytics is, without trying to constrain how vendors can add value to that basic specification. That's now out there as part of the Division 2525 process, and it's been shared broadly amongst vendors in the industry. And I think they're using it to promote their own products as well. We're looking at analytics, improving smart demand management for the smarter grid. AI is now in mainstream use. And one of the things that we're very careful is to define what AI is. Obviously, with chatbot GPT and all these other things coming along, people recognize the power of AI. But in the context of analytics, there are many different types of AI in many different ways, and applying the correct way to the data we have is the important thing, rather than using the dilutive term AI for what we do. That said, we think there's a tremendous promise of the new technology to advance over the next 10 years what we've already done, both in terms of fault detection and diagnostics and enterprise management. And if John Petsy were still with us, I think one thing that he would make clear is that FDD is not solely equivalent to analytics. It is only one application of analytics. There are many other things that we can and need to do with analytics. I'll leave it at that, Anto. Thanks.
Right. Any comments or thoughts from anyone?
I guess
Should
it's Jim being driven by the fact that, going back to what we're talking about with traces, there's so much data now. You got to have some sort of tool to sift the stuff and narrow it down to get access to the information you want as well.
Absolutely, Roger. And I think that everyone gets that. And that's why it's mainstream. That isn't to say that it isn't early and there isn't lots of different value that different vendors can add. But at least people recognize that it's a must-have.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next pillar is specifications. A lot is going on there. I'm going to hand it over to Steve to guide us through.
Sure. So as an industry, I think we never tire of adding words to describe what it is we're trying to do out there. And as of, I guess, the more recent times, a lot is going on in the area of cybersecurity in particular. So we've incorporated it into the work that we're doing for Division 2525. We're collaborating with the Building Cybersecurity Group to make sure that we're in line with where they're going. BACnet has added information into their manufacturer's guide, and they're updating their ASHRAE guideline 13, which includes a very extensive section on cyber. So you're seeing cyber showing up in many different areas. From an open perspective, you know, there's an area that we're focused on is recognizing that there's this evolution from network protocols to APIs. So whenever you're talking about how to integrate one package with another package, almost invariably, you're going to be talking about, tell me what your API looks like. Well, there's very little that's been done to really control what the heck that means and what's going to be useful. But so one of the efforts we have, and we really appreciate others' input in this, is we want to define what does it mean to have a good API, one that from a supplier standpoint and a customer standpoint can easily be supported and allows for easy integration of the various systems. So I say that's in those two areas of cyber and API development are really critical at this point. But you know, it's interesting when you look at on the subject of specifications, it's also what are we seeing from the specifying community? What's changed there in the past few years, and how is all this affecting what's being done when new buildings and new retrofits are coming out? And certainly cyber is showing up more and more in specifications because of the need to integrate and to interoperate. You're seeing almost in every specification references to the MSI or Master Systems Integrator. You're seeing cloud computing becoming a much more common thing, and very significant to all of this is the building network, and a lot more efforts going into defining what the network needs to be for not just the one system like a building automation, but how it integrates with all the different other OT systems that are in a building, and then for the larger opportunities in particular, how it ties into the owner's IT environment. So, because as I think we all recognize now, at the controller level, more and more of the devices are going up to IP, and when you make that transition, you really need to be a lot more cognizant of how your network is going to operate and how the data is going to flow and how that network is going to be designed and supported. So those are the topics that we want to make sure we cover in the upcoming summit.
Thoughts or questions? Let's move on then to procurement. Rick, this is your baby.
Sure. In that space between supply and demand is, you know, where a transaction happens, and as you know, both sides of the equation evolve. We as a industry kind of have to be conscious of you can't just expect the market to change the way they buy. We have to be actually changing the way we sell or package or deliver as well. And like any kind of chicken and egg scenario, there has to be recognition of a different kind of desire, and then we have to arrange ourselves for a different kind of solution. And we're seeing more and more evidence of vendors in our space that are offering to sell their solutions or their products in a different kind of way. And we've talked a lot about the different things already, and that the technology has moved along nicely. And then the pure procurement itself there's quite a bit of evidence of where vendors are getting themselves into a position to be able to sell in a different way. And The first bullet is, just the recognition of the concept of a sort of a hybrid procurement where it's not just all about first cost, but the ongoing costs can be built in. And evidence of that really is in the form, I'd say most significantly in the star as a service. So physical plant as a service, HVAC as a service, BAS as a service, or more recently, the independent data layer as a service. Getting prepared to be able to sell things over time rather than all just in one shot. And so having contracts that actually span time, not just first cost. And a lot of vendors are picking up on that desire for owners to be able to have that, whether it's cloud fees or, like I said, the whole building automation system as a service, as like seat license sort of thing, following on IT. Another thing that we've done, you've already been mentioned, is the work of Division 2525. I want to mention it a little bit different way, is that document and the framework that's being described there is our industry saying that we are ready to have our solutions defined in a different place in a different way. And the Division 2525 process and procurement process, we believe will have a significant impact, and we'll talk about it at the summit. Other parts of the industry, in terms of like the cybersecurity vendors, of getting together around a framework. It's another great example of being able to put things into a context of what now can be actually bought in a different way. I can buy cybersecurity, and single pane of glass and promise of digital twins all are gaining traction. Not just from the customers asking for it, but from vendors getting organized to be able to provide those services and products in a way that the owners are asking for. So I clicked through all that pretty quick, but again, the summary is that if you want consumers or the demand side to buy something in a different way, you have it to, as the suppliers, you have to be ready to meet them in the middle at that transaction. And I think we're seeing great evidence of that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Rick. Any thoughts or questions from the group? There's a lot of stuff here. Obviously pretty clear. All right, moving on. Workforce.
Well, it's really exciting to prepare for the summit, to be able to present to the community kind of the state of the industry's workforce in 2023 and how far we've come over the past several years in finding the opportunities and filling the gaps. I think if we follow the path of outlining demand for skills and what is happening in the demand for certain skills, and how are adjacent industries impacting the demand for those skills, and then what is the supply, and then how do we solve the gap? So that's really the way we're going to frame the talking points at the summit. But as far as demand for skills are concerned, the skills that we need are changing. We know that historically we have been able to do a lot by adding a little bit of networking, a little bit of programming on top of trade-based knowledge. And today what we're finding is that we almost need to start from the other direction and get people that are very capable in network skills and programming and data specific skills and teach them about the systems that they're going to be managing. A couple of reasons for that is because of what's happening in the industry. The most successful organizations today are innovating how they're deploying technology to reduce the amount of labor that needs to be used to deploy a project or run a building, which means that the types of skills individuals need is also evolving. But what we're also seeing is that this is true in industrial automation. It's true in several other sectors. So if we look at the demand for labor today, building automation and the building technology specific vacancies across the United States, not counting outside of the United States, only accounts for about 30% of the vacant positions today. And that is before the Infrastructure Act really gets moving hard and fast in the direction that it is planning to go. And that is before the demand for labor to address some of the Inflation Reduction Act jobs that are embedded in that program. And Inflation Reduction Act is kind of an oxymoron. So that's the state of the demand. And then when you look at the supply, what we know about the supply is that about 35% of our current workforce will be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. And with that goes a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of experience, and succession planning is the name of the game today. Those companies that are successfully dealing with this and having very good success are the ones that have strong mentorship programs that are working to build their internal capability to grow their own, and the ones that are looking to what the changing demographics of the supply look like coming into that. What we know for a fact, and this is because we have together in partnership with a lot of different organizations, we formed agreements with federal and state agencies to really have a seat at the table to understand what the strategy of a geographic area is for workforce. And many states and agencies are very serious about increasing the number of OT and IT skills in their state to attract business, to attract efficiency, and to drive their communities to a smarter reality. What we know is that right now, about 50% of the people that are applying to jobs in the building automation space are what we call career changers. They are not new entrants into the workforce. They're people that are already working in an industry somewhere, just not ours. And of those, a significant portion of them are people that are upskilling. They're coming from hospitality. They're coming from a lot of different places that have nothing to do with technology. And others are coming from adjacent technologies that are different than ours, which means they really have to understand our systems. What the important message is that we're not necessarily performing very well with young people. We, as an industry, are not any worse than any other industry, but technology is not being successful to attract a younger generation, which may be surprising. And it's why it's so important to make decisions based on data, right? You know, we're a database decision-making group of people that prides ourselves on analytics. And the analytics is telling us that we have to really do a good job to attract the right type of people coming out of programs. It's one of the reasons why there's some really excellent programs. Stacks and Jewels is a perfect example because they focus on that younger demographic. We are going to be bringing them into this conversation at AHR. We've invited Mike to be at the summit and hoping that he's going to be able to be there in time, changing his flight plans. And it's also important why there are several other organizations that are working in associations to try and bridge that gap and form partnerships, as well as private companies that have lots of different training that are out there. This is kind of the state of the workforce. I'm very interested to hear from the community. What questions would you like answered at the summit? If we were going to be talking about this and the summit were today, what does the audience want to know? What can we share that would help inform our community of how you can plug in?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa. Any thoughts or questions from the group?
That's great.
Pete Scanlon's just asked a question.
Yeah.
No answer.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that. What is the total number that is part of? How many job positions are needed? Yeah, what are the numbers? What are the opportunities of jobs? Have you done any work on that?
Yeah, we have. In fact, we have some contracts with workforce agencies to study that data and to get deep into the weeds. And that's one of the reasons why we emphasize the importance of mentorship inside organizations as a way to develop leadership skills at all levels of leadership, beginning at the front lines and all the way up through an organization, and to have promotional pathways where people are actually getting promoted into new roles and being able to move up the supply chain within their companies. The 35% that will be retiring is really focused on two categories of occupations. It's going to be a mass exodus from facility operations, and people that run buildings today, which is a huge opportunity for the analytics community and for those serving the building owners to help streamline informing the owners, the new owners, the younger owners with what they need to know. And the other segment of that population that is going to be retiring really has to do with the hardworking men and women in small business that are systems integrators and innovators, and that may be looking at mergers and acquisitions, or other companies that may come in and find different ways to consolidate efforts. A lot of different things we're seeing in the industry to address the gap.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Melissa, and thanks, Pete, for the question. How many is his question? It's just reminded.
How many what?
What kind of
You
numbers?
got to come to the summit. I'm not giving away all the data. Come to the summit, buddy.
Pete's going to be there, so he's Pete. You'll have to wait a couple of weeks for that answer. Thank you. So those are the 5 pillars, but there's sort of some other things that are sort of we sort of stating as cross-cutting because they don't directly relate to the 5 pillars. Obviously, the whole issue of the awareness of ESG and priority, ESG in terms of awareness and priority for a lot of C-suite. We already touched on that, but that's very, very real, and it touches all of the different pillars, and it clearly affects us. And it affects how we can provide some value to building owners. Increase in cybersecurity awareness. We talked a little bit about that, although there's probably never going to be enough awareness of cybersecurity because it's just one of those things. But that's certainly increased over the past couple of years compared to before the pandemic. There's been a lot of community building. Obviously, Monday Live in a way is a community, an online community that we meet once a week. C4SB is a different kind of community that Rick has spoken about many times. The BIG network, there seems to be a chapter springing up every time I look at my LinkedIn feed in some city somewhere across the US. So that's really great. And there are other communities being sort of built or forming. What James Dice is doing with Nexus is another one of those. And there's this sort of interesting realization that we've been hearing about smart cities for a decade or two now, in sort of similar context to talking about smart buildings. But I think there's been sort of a realization that smart cities is really in principle as sort of a collection of buildings, or I should say a collection of smart buildings, right? So if you think of a city as predominantly buildings with infrastructure and transportation, but the core part of it is buildings. So without smart buildings, it's very difficult to see how you can actually have a smart city. So that there's a connection there that's sort of interesting to explore, and sort of not justification, sort of motivation for us to make buildings smarter. There's a lot of work also in the building ratings sort of side of things. We had a guest on Monday Live from UL that talked about Spire, and there's Smart Score moving along, and David Katz, who often is in the audience of Monday Live, is promoting his project called BIQ2, Building Intelligent Quotient. the second version thereof, right? And there are others that's not mentioned here, and a lot of work's going on, and maybe Rick can just sort of touch on this a little bit on showcases that the coalition is working on to try and bring together all of these different concepts and actually sort of make it into a showcase that we can actually point to and sort of understand. So these are the cross-cutting stuff that's going on. Rick, do you want to speak to showcases for a bit?
Yeah, in just an effort to be able to show that the technology, somebody already said it earlier, thank you, that the technology is here. A lot of it is sort of new. Some of the capabilities are just recently stitched together in a new and different way. Tracy was talking about it's been more software, hardware's kind of been in place, interoperability has been in place for a long time, but just to be able to show that there are simple examples of interoperability and composable solutions that are not terribly difficult to show off, to be able to show off the independent data layer, to be able to show off the single pane of glass, to be able to show off the hardware interoperability, and do it in a couple of real places. So we've got schools, fire stations, office buildings, and a few other places where we're going to be able to and we're hoping to add more and more of these showcases and lists of buildings that are compliant with the interoperability goals, or compliant with the GEBS document, or compliant with, just in general, some majority of the things we're trying to say are ready to buy, or we are ready to sell. And so that's a sort of like a showroom where you go to see what the new car looks like, and you've been just asking for faster horses for your whole life, and now you get to go to a showroom and see what an automobile looks like. That's sort of the concept of show people what it might look like and get into their head a little bit different idea of maybe how to articulate what they really want.
Great, thank you,
So
Rick.
there are a couple of comments that I think are worthy. Scott Simpson made a great comment about the importance of some of these cross-cutting initiatives to being able to attract workers and the success, and he's absolutely right. The younger generation definitely want to latch on to something that they consider meaningful and impactful, whether it's ESG or smart cities or something like that. And to Pete's good questions, just to let you know, we literally have data that we're pulling from a lot of different sources, so that at the summit, you'll have real numbers of incumbent workers and vacant positions. And this is tied directly to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Department of Labor. So it's going to be a very thorough and good analysis for you, Pete. So just hang tight and we'll have some good data for you.
Thank you for responding to Scott, Melissa. Yeah, I've heard several other companies speak to the fact that if you position what you're doing as a company right, and that's sort of mission-driven, related to many of these sort of cross-cutting issues, and make it and present it as being exciting from a technology perspective, it's not a challenge getting talent, especially the younger talent. And so that's any other thoughts before we start to wrap this up?
I'll just add on this whole attracting folks. It all comes down to a perception perspective as I see it. We are trying to change 25 years, 30 years, whatever it is, and trying to change the perception of what people think our industry is. Not the folks that are in it, the folks that we need to join this industry. And it's not going to happen overnight. And unless we as an industry, as I see it, really come together and really get on the same page with respect to opportunities, excitement, growth potential, you can make a really good living, whatever, fill in the blank. is we will still have this challenge if we are all together in 10 years from now.
Well,
But it's-
and one thing to encourage everybody that there are really good things that are working, that there are organizations that are having great success. But it has a lot more to do with messaging around what they care about and not looking solely to describe ourselves. If we focus on the issues that really matter, and remember that we're trying to help them want to make our story part of their story, that it's the story they want to be able to tell about what they're accomplishing in their career with their time and their contributions. And these cross-cutting issues really, really do make a big difference.
Yeah, I think it's been said more than a few times on Monday Live over the past 2 years. We need to be listening a lot more, and we need to get out of our own way. We are the industry that we're trying to disrupt, or improve and disrupt and then improve. So that's easy to say, but it's not easy to do because there's lots of people involved.
And one thing is because of our contracts and agreements with workforce agencies and colleges around the country, we have data from the people that we want to attract. We have over 10,000 surveys knowing exactly what they say and what they care about. So we have data-based evidence of what's important to them. It's not just the opinion of Melissa or Monday Live, that we'll be able to share some real interesting and helpful information for everyone who comes.
So Roger, do you mind if I ask you to just sort of wrap up this show by sharing your thoughts about all of this? This seems a lot, right?
Yeah, no, and I think to me that's the part of it that really sums up everything. These are exciting times. I've been in the industry a long time, and things change by osmosis. You suddenly arrive and think, oh, right, yeah, that's changed, but it took how long to define BACnet as a standard? All these things take forever. What you're seeing now is something that we've talked about, quite a few times recently, is how fast the pace is now. We've always been following other industries. We've been slow to react. We're beginning to gain more momentum, a little bit like Rick was talking about, those SaaS, and we're talking about interoperability, and we're talking about stuff offsite as well as onsite. And I think that's where the changes come, is, we've been limited to that kind of little bit that's the on-prem. And I think I was thinking out loud to myself earlier, my kids always I used to try and explain to my kids what I did for a living, and they never got it. They kind of now understand it more than they ever did before, especially as they understand the whole sustainability, energy thing and stuff. And I just think this is a fantastic time to be in the industry. It really is.
So, Anto, I'd just like to add a little bit for what Roger was saying with regard to his kids. So one of the things I got exposed to a number of years ago when I was in a Richmond-based business was the effort of Richmond, Virginia, to establish career academies at the high school level, which has been popularized very much so in Nashville, Tennessee, and a number of other cities around the U.S., where you have multiple educational initiatives going on to teach high schoolers specific subjects that they can, by taking that, entering into a career academy, let's say for HVAC or for carpentry or electrical, being an electrician, you come out actually prepared as a high school graduate to go to work. And so I think Nashville has over 60 different career academies. Cisco did this on their own years ago with networking. So there are a number of, they have a Cisco academy right here in Richmond that that high schoolers can attend to become network trained at the age of 18. So I think our industry could very much benefit from an initiative at the high school level where we develop high school curriculum specifically for our industry, smart building academies. that would be a huge benefit to what we're talking about here. Instead of waiting to get them as they figure out at age 25, what the hell am I supposed to do? Because I can't get a job in XYZ industry, or I just came out of the military. Why don't we start when they're 14, 15 years of age and start teaching them about smart buildings and get them
And
excited?
I think Melissa has a quick response to that before we wrap. Melissa.
That's one of the big things that we'll be showcasing at AHR is the programs that we have begun and that we're seeding. And we actually, we're bringing in some of the high school teachers to the event to highlight, celebrate them, and let them experience the love from this industry for what they're doing. We developed the standard, we've developed the curriculum, we have it. We just now need to execute and support these schools.
Yeah, but I don't know to what extent you're familiar with the concept of career academies, but it's pretty well developed now. It's been out for 5, 6, 7 years at least. And so I think that methodology, the blueprint that exists, we should try to take advantage of it.
Okay, and with that, we need to wrap because we passed the top of the hour. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, panelists and attendees, and we will be back next week to continue this. We'll be talking about how we wrap this together, how we start to wrap this up. You know, we've talked about the demand, asking different things, and we're talking about the industry, figuring out different things, and how do we match this? And that's really what we'll be talking about next week, and also the main part of what the summit's all about. So look forward to that next week. Other than that, we'll put a video of this up on YouTube by tomorrow or the day after, and have a great week, everybody.
See you all later.
Bye-bye.
Hey, guys.
Bye.
Bye now.